The sky over Armageddon was the color of a fresh bruise, a sickly greenish purple mottled with the copper of atmospheric poisons. It had been 20 days since the great beast, the demon Primarch Angron, had been physically shattered and psychically hurled back into the warp. The silence that descended was not peaceful. It was the silence of a charnel house, the pause after the slaughterman's axe has fallen. The first war for Armageddon was over. The Imperium had won. This victory was written in epitaphs of fire across the planet's surface. Hive Hellsreach, a mountain of human endeavor that had once scraped the heavens, was now a jagged, molten tombstone. Its 90 million inhabitants were either atomized dust or charred statues frozen in their final moments of terror. The vast plains between the hives, once marked by sprawling manufactorums and agridomes, were now nothing but leagues of impacted ash and gore, a red-black mire where titans had fallen and billions of Imperial guardsmen had been consumed. The very air was a toxic soup tasting of sulfur ozone and the lingering coppery taint of demonic ichor. The ground itself was violated, pockmarked with craters that did not follow the laws of physics. Some glowed with an iridescent malice, others were pits of absolute sound-devouring darkness. Angron was gone, but his stain remained a psychic poison soaked deep into the bedrock of the world. On the Desolation Plateau, a vast scorched table of rock overlooking the skeletal ruins of Hive Tartarus, the victors had established their foothold. The banners of the Space Wolves, limp and heavy with grime, fluttered weakly from the hulls of landed Thunderhawks and the command towers of colossal siege tanks. They were the Vulca Fenrica, the Wolves of Fenris, and they were masters of this ruined dominion. Logan Grimner, the Great Wolf, stood at the edge of the plateau. He was a figure of saga, ancient and powerful, his braided white hair and long beard stark against the scorched black iron of his Terminator armor. The armor of Russ was scarred, its wolf pelt mantle stiff with dried blood, both demonic and human. His eyes, the color of a frozen Fenrisian sea, scanned the horizon, finding no satisfaction in the quiet. He held his axe, Morkai, its haft resting on the ground, its energy field dormant. Beside him, his oldest wolf lord, Braw Thunderfist, let out a low growl, his voice a rumble of barely contained energy. The last of the warp spawn are hunted down. The planet is quiet, Great Wolf. The saga is written. Grimner's lip curled a motion that was half sneer, half wince. Quiet, no. It is listening. Look at that sky, Braw. It's watching us. He gestured with his axe to a lingering, shimmering tear in the fabric of the air 1,000 kilometers up. He is gone, but he left the door open. We did not win. We merely survived. Ulrich the Slayer, the wolves' ancient chaplain, stepped forward, his black armor a stark contrast to the gray of his brethren. His skull helm was magnetized to his hip. His bare, weathered face was a road map of righteous fury. We faced a Primarch of the archenemy and cast him down. The Allfather is pleased. The men who died here died well. The men who lived are the problem. Grimner countered, his voice a low growl. He turned from the vista of ruin to look back at his own encampment. The wolves were restless. They were cleaning weapons, dueling in the dirt, and roaring challenges to the toxic sky, but their famous boisterousness was gone. The mead halls would be quiet tonight. They had fought brothers Imperial Guard and aliens. But this was different. This fight had soured their souls. They had faced pure divine hatred, and the cost of matching it had been steep. A kilometer away, separated by a strictly enforced cordon of scorched earth, was the second encampment. It was a place of unnerving order. The Grey Knights. Their Aegis-patterned Terminator armor was immaculate silver, untouched by the pervasive ash, as if repelling the world's grief by sheer psychic will. They had planted a circle of psychoreceptive conduits around their position, and a low subsonic thrumming emanated from it, the sound of psychic cleansing. They were not resting. They were not repairing. They were purging. Their commander, Lord Prognosticator Kisnar, stood in the center of the circle, his eyes closed, his nemesis force halberd planted before him. He was not a warrior in the way Grimnar was. He was a warden, a scalpel, a guardian of secrets. He and his brothers had fought alongside the wolves, their psychic powers and anathema blades tearing Angron's essence apart. But there was no shared victory. The Grey Knights saw the wolves as little better than noble savages, their uncontrolled fury dangerously close to the very enemy they fought. The wolves saw the Grey Knights as cold, secretive, and untrustworthy. They were allies of circumstance, and the circumstance was over. Now they were just two predators circling the same kill with very different ideas of what to do with the carcass. And then there was the carcass, the living. 14 billion survivors. They were not in the hive cities. They were in the camps. Vast, sprawling oceans of humanity spread across the less toxic plains, huddled in the rusting shells of refugee transports, makeshift tents of flakboard and industrial piping. They were the factory workers of Hell's Reach, the agri-toilers of the plains, the scribes of Tartarus, and the hive-gangers of Infernus. All titles were gone now. They were just the survivors, and they were not grateful. They were terrified. A young woman, Elara, rocked back and forth, clutching a cold, empty ration tin. She was in Processing Camp Delta, a muddy field sectioned off by razor wire and guarded by exhausted guardsmen who wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Elara hadn't spoken in 4 days, not since she had watched her Hab Block supervisor, a man she despised, suddenly sprout horns and claws, roaring a prayer to a blood god as he tore his own wife apart with his bare hands. Not since she had seen the sky open like a wet mouth, vomiting forth legions of brass-skinned creatures with switching tails and burning hot swords. They were not aliens. They were not mutants. They were wrong. They were impossibilities made real. She had seen the Grey Knights arrive silver angels descending on pillars of white light. She had watched them incinerate 1,000 cultists with a gesture their psychic purity a searing fire. But she also saw them incinerate a platoon of guardsmen who had broken and tried to flee. They hadn't paused. They hadn't offered mercy. They had simply erased them. She had seen the space wolves charge, howling like beasts, their joy in slaughter, a terrifying mirror of the demons they fought. They had saved her processing line from a pack of Cornate fleshhounds, but their eyes as they passed her were not human. They were the eyes of joyful killers. In the tent beside her, a man named Jax, a former manufacturum foreman, was whispering to his son. "Don't look at them," he hissed, pulling the boy's head down as a space wolf patrol passed the camp's perimeter. "But they saved us," the boy whimpered. "They aren't men," Jax whispered, his body trembling. "They're just another kind of monster. The red ones wanted our blood. The silver ones, they look at us like we're filth. And the grey ones, they just like to kill. There are no saviors, boy. Only teeth." The 14 billion survivors were not a population to be saved. They were a mass of traumatized witnesses. The fundamental lie of the Imperium, that its power was absolute and the galaxy was theirs to command, had been burned away. They had seen the truth. They knew with visceral certainty that humanity was not the hunter. It was the prey. This knowledge was a spiritual plague. It was a seed of corruption. It was a memory that could not be unseen. They huddled in their camps, whispering of the red angel of the sky that bled of the joy of murder. They were broken, contaminated. They were the true terrible prize of the war. They were the living legacy of Angron's attack. And as Logan Grimnar stared down at them from his plateau, a cold dread settled in his gut, a feeling worse than any he had felt facing the demon Primarch. The war wasn't over. The true battle, the battle for the soul of Armageddon, had only just begun. And the enemy was not a demon. The enemy was the truth. In the distorted currents of the warp just days away, a new fleet was materializing. It flew no colors of a Space Marine chapter, nor any heraldry of the Imperial Navy. It bore only the single stark sigil of the Inquisition. And it was not coming to help. It was coming to cleanse. The translation from the Imperium was not a gentle arrival, it was a violation. Space itself tore open above Armageddon, a gaping, static-charged wound that vomited forth a new armada. The fabric of reality screamed as dozens of capital ships punched their way back into the mundane, their arrival displacing a torrent of empiric radiation that blinded augurs and sent shipboard astropaths reeling, clutching their heads. The victorious fleet, the battered battle barges of the Space Wolves, and the surviving cruisers of the Imperial Navy were already on high alert. But this was not a new demonic incursion. This was something colder. The new fleet was vast, larger than the relief force that had fought and broken Angron. And it was black. Every hull was the color of void obsidian absorbing the faint light of Armageddon's distant star. They bore no regimental honors, no chapter insignia save one, the stark, unadorned eye of the holy ordos of the Inquisition. These were not ships of war in the common sense. They were vessels of judgment. Ancient ark-like cruisers bristled with weapons batteries that were both archaic and terrifyingly advanced. Black ships, their holds psychoactively dampened, moved like sharks among the flock. Leading them was a leviathan, a vessel that dwarfed even Logan Grimner's flagship, the Hrafenkel. It was the Solanus, an Arch Mechanicus Fortress-class battleship, its prow a colossal bladed sigil of the Inquisition that glowed with a cold, blue-white energy. It moved with a dreadful, ponderous certainty, ignoring the hails of the Navy fleet master, bypassing the Wolves' picket line as if it were irrelevant debris. On the bridge of the Hrafenkel, the command crew bristled. No recognition codes. Great Wolf, the Vox officer, reported, his voice tight. They are not responding to hails. Wait. We are receiving an override sigil. It is Rosette. Priority Alpha Prime. Logan Grimner's hand tightened on the arm of his command throne. Alpha Prime. He dares. The Inquisitorial fleet did not ask for anchorage. It took it. The black ships fanned out, creating a high-orbit net, a cage of guns that sealed the entire planet. Then the Vox crackled to life across every open channel, a voice synthesized, devoid of emotion, and backed by an authority that superseded all others. By the authority of the Ordo Malleus, this system is now under interdiction. The war is concluded, the cleansing begins. A single razor-sharp lander, a sleek obsidian dart unlike any Imperial design detached from the Solanus. It ignored the established landing zones on the Desolation Plateau, its engines burning with a cold white fire as it descended directly towards the unnerving ordered encampment of the Grey Knights. When the ramp lowered, the very air seemed to grow cold. A perimeter was established instantly, not by guardsmen, but by Tempestus scions. In jet-black carapace armor, their hellguns raised their mirrored visors, betraying no humanity. Behind them, chained and hooded figures were herded out bound psychers, their mouths gagged with metal, their minds held on a psychic leash already beginning to sniff the air for the taint of the warp. Then Lord Inquisitor Geskust emerged. He was tall for a mortal man, clad in exquisite black power armor that was more akin to a suit of judgment than a tool of war. It was inlaid with silver hexagrammic wards and sigils of abjuration. A high armored collar framed a face that was pale ascetic and utterly devoid of compassion. His eyes were cold, intelligent, and ancient. He carried no bolter, but in his gauntleted hand he held a tall force staff, its head a microcosm of the inquisitorial eye crackling with barely contained power. He was flanked by his personal retinue, a trio of silent, shadowy figures that might have been assassins and a full command squad of Grey Knights Terminators. Their silver armor was burnished to a mirror sheen, marked with their own heraldry, and they moved with a grim purpose. They were not Kisna's men. They belonged to Geskust. Lord Prognosticator Kisna, the Grey Knight commander who had fought the war, was waiting for him, his own halberd planted in the ash. The two silver and black forces met a convergence of absolute, unyielding dogma. Gesgust did not offer greetings. He did not acknowledge the sacrifice of the men before him. His cold gaze swept across the ruined plateau, past the watchful, growling space wolves on the ridge, and settled on the distant, sprawling refugee camps. His lip curled a minute expression of profound disgust. Prognosticator Kisnar Gesquest's amplified voice boomed across the silence. Your preliminary rituals of sanctification are noted. They are insufficient. The contamination is total. He turned his back to the heroes of the war and faced his own Voxcaster. He raised his staff, and the signal went out, overriding every command channel in the system, from the Navy flagships in high orbit to the muddy Vox sets in the refugee camps. I am Lord Inquisitor Gesgust of the Ordo Malleus. By the authority vested in me by the Holy Terran Synod and the unanimous consent of the Ordos, I declare this system Armageddon Sectoris Interdictus. The broadcast was absolute. All off-world traffic, military and civilian, is forbidden. Any vessel of any allegiance attempting to breach the orbital cordon will be designated excommunicate hostis and destroyed without prejudice. All astropathic communication is hereby suspended. The choirs are silenced. This system is cut off from the light of the Emperor. None shall speak of what has happened here. All Imperial ground forces, including all Astartes chapters, are to stand down from independent operations. You will consolidate at your present positions and await my directive. Your victory is irrelevant. Your testimony is required for the purification. The message ended. Aboard the Hrafnkel, Logan Grimnar stood up from his throne, the metal groaning in protest. Bror Thunderfist slammed a massive gauntlet against a console. He silences us. He cages us after we bled this world clean. Grimnar stared at the image of the Solanus hanging in the void, a black spider sealing them in. That is not the voice of an ally, B-Mark. That is the voice of a jailer. The war against the demon is over. The war against the Imperium has just begun. The summons was not a request. It was a command sigil delivered by a silent, tempestuous scion, demanding the presence of all force commanders at Gesgust's provisional command center. The structure had been erected in less than an hour, a stark, prefabricated fortress of black iron and shimmering psycho wards that stood in the no-man's land between the Space Wolf and Grey Knight encampments. It was cold inside, the air scrubbed clean and smelling of ozone and sterile incense. There was no campaign table, only a gleaming obsidian dais where Gesgust stood, flanked by his personal Grey Knight guard. Logan Grimnar entered last, his massive Terminator plate causing the deck to groan. His wolf guard followed, but was stopped at the door by Gesgust's scions. The Lord Inquisitor will see the commanders alone. One said, his voice a metallic rasp. Grimnar's wolf guard bristled hands moving to their bolters. Grimnar raised a single gauntleted hand. "Stow," he growled. "I will hear what this Lord has to say. Wait for my call." He entered the chamber, his presence a defiant storm of animal vitality in the sterile room. Lord Prognosticator Kisnar was already there, his silver armor seeming to blend with the grey, sterile light. He stood apart, his helmet held under his arm, his face a mask of disciplined neutrality. A few surviving Imperial Navy admirals and guard generals huddled near the entrance, looking small and broken, their uniforms stained, their eyes hollow. They were the men who had just sacrificed billions to win this world. Gesgust did not bid them sit. He did not offer thanks. He began. "I have reviewed the preliminary data. The physical victory is adequate." His voice was a dry scalpel. "The spiritual defeat, however, is catastrophic." He activated a hollow projector. It did not show troop movements or casualty figures. It showed a swirling, sickly purple-red map of Armageddon's psychic signature. Angron the Demonculaba has left his mark not only on the planet, but on its populace. 14,200,000,000 surviving souls. Gesgust paced slowly, his force staff clicking on the deck. 14 billion vectors for contamination. One of the guard generals, a grizzled man named Vork, stepped forward, trembling with exhaustion and rage. My Lord Inquisitor, these people are heroes. They fought. They resisted. They witnessed. Gesgust snapped, his cold eyes flashing. The general flinched as if struck. They witnessed the apotheosis of the Red Angel. They saw the skies tear open. They heard the true names of the Neverborn. They felt the warp's caress. And that he paused, leveling a finger at the terrified general, is a sin for which there is no absolution. This is madness! Grimner's voice was a low growl from the back of the room. They are subjects of the Emperor. They endured. They are to be honored. Honored. Gesgust turned his full chilling attention to the great wolf. You are a savage, Grimnar. You understand the blade, but you do not understand the plague. Tell me, Wolf King, what do you do with a rabid hound? I kill it, Grimnar said flatly. Precisely. But what if that hound has licked every man, woman, and child in your village? Do you wait for the foaming madness to take them? Do you pray it passes? Or do you cleanse the village before the plague spreads to the next valley? He raised his hand, and the hollow display shifted. It showed a single human brain, a glowing cancerous growth spreading from the amygdala. This is the logic of the Ordo Malleus. This is the truth you beasts are too simple to grasp. Chaos is not an enemy to be fought. It is a disease to be excised. Every soul that has seen a demon is a potential gateway. A memory becomes a nightmare. A nightmare becomes a whisper. A whisper becomes a cult. A cult becomes a new demonic incursion. The cycle must be broken. You speak of 14 billion people. Kisnar the Grey Knight spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, resonant, and heavy. Not all are weak. We are here to guard against that weakness. Your guard is finite prognosticator, Gesgust retorted, showing no deference. Your knights cannot garrison the mind of every single survivor for the rest of their lives. The risk is incalculable. If even one of these souls falls, if one ship carrying one tainted memory leaves this system, it could doom an entire segmentum. The first war for Armageddon would be a footnote to the galactic holocaust it engenders. He let the silence hang heavy and absolute. The guard generals were pale understanding dawning in their eyes. The calculus is simple. Gesgust continued, his voice dropping to a confidential conspiratorial tone. We sacrifice one world, one generation to save 10,000. The lives of these 14 billion are a regrettable but statistically necessary expenditure for the continued survival of the human race. He turned to a console and pressed a single rune. Therefore I have signed the sacerdotal edict. The final solution is enacted. You would exterminate us this world? Kisnar asked, his voice hardening, his hand gripping his halberd. A world we just bled to save. Exterminatus number. Gesgust almost smiled. It was a terrifying sight. That is, inefficient. Crude. We are not butchers, Lord Kesnar. We are surgeons. This world is a valuable asset. The infrastructure is shattered, but the planet remains. It will be repopulated. It will serve the Imperium once more. Then what of the survivors? General Vork whispered, his voice cracking. Gesgust turned to him, his face a mask of cold, bureaucratic zeal. The sacerdotal edict has 3 phases. Phase 1, the entire surviving populace is to be rounded up into the processing camps. They will be rendered sterile by surgical and chemical means. There will be no next generation of Armageddon. A gasp of horror came from one of the Navy admirals. Phase 2, the populace will be divided into labor tithes. They will be shipped off-world under total inquisitorial guard to the penal mining worlds of the Galactic Rim. They will work until they die servicing the Imperium's war machine, far from any major population center where their tainted memories can harm no one but themselves. Phase 3. Gesgust concluded, his voice triumphant. Armageddon and the first war for it will be struck from all Imperial records. It will be declared mundus perdita. In 50 years, new colonists will arrive on a newly discovered agri-world. The memory of Angron, the memory of this war, and the memory of these 14 billion souls will cease to exist. The plague will be contained. The Imperium will be safe. He looked at the assembled commanders, his eyes shining with the light of absolute righteous conviction. This is the judgment of the Ordo Malleus. This is the will of the Emperor. You will assist us in this great, necessary work." The chamber was gripped by a silence so cold, so absolute, that the quiet rasp of Gesgust's breathing was audible. The Imperial Guard generals were ashen, their gazes fixed on the floor, their minds unable to process the scale of the atrocity demanded of them. Kisner the Grey Knight remained immobile, his face a chiseled, unreadable mask. He was a creature of logic and duty, and the Inquisitor's cold, terrible calculus resonated with his own chapter's sacred charge to guard against the demonic at any cost. The silence was broken. It began as a low vibration, a sound from the depths of a Fenrisian winter, the growl of a predator that knows it is about to kill. It came from the back of the chamber. No, the word was not a shout. It was a physical force, a rumble of stone grinding on stone that vibrated through the deck plates. Logan Grimner stepped forward, his massive Terminator plate seeming to suck all the light from the room. The air around him shimmered with a sudden animalistic heat. No, he repeated louder this time. The Tempestus Scions at the door raised their hell guns, their targeting lasers painting red dots on the ancient scarred armor of Russ. Grimnar didn't even notice. His eyes, blue and cold as glacial ice, were locked on Gesgust. The Inquisitor raised a placid hand. "Stand down. The beast is merely confused. You—" Grimnar's voice was thick with a contempt so profound it was almost tangible. "You hide in the void while worlds bleed. You watch while men, women, and children tear demons apart with their bare hands, dying in the millions for the Emperor you claim to serve, and then you descend a carrion bird to pick at the bones and declare them unclean." He took another step, his gauntlet clenching and unclenching. "This is not logic. This is not cleansing. This is the act of a Drekker, a coward. It is a betrayal so deep it sickens my soul." He swept his arm out, a gesture encompassing the entire planet. "These 14 billion souls are not vectors. They are not statistics for your bloodless equations. They are the men who held the line when the sky broke. They are the women who died at their forge stations building the shells we fired. They fought beside us. They bled beside us. They won beside us." With a crash that shook the chamber, Grimnar slammed the haft of his great axe Morkai onto the black iron floor. By the laws of Fenris and the living word of Leman Russ, they have earned the title of Einherjar. They are warriors of honor. They are not your chattel to be gelded and shipped like cattle. He pointed a massive ceramite-armored finger directly at the Inquisitor. "They are under my protection. They are under the protection of the Vilka Fenrika. You will not touch them." For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Gesgust's face, cold, condescending amusement. A dry, rasping chuckle escaped his lips. "Protection," he sneered. "Lord Grimnar, you are precisely what the archives claim, a primitive. A noble, furious, and utterly predictable beast. You reek of honor, a luxury that has no place in the real war." Gesgust paced his staff, clicking his own Grey Knight guard, mirroring his movements. "The real war, Wolf King, is not fought with axes and howls. It is fought in the shadows of the soul. It is fought with the scalpel, the quarantine, and the necessary fire. You see the soldier. I see the germ he carries. You see the hero. I see the doorway he has left open for the arch-enemy. You do not comprehend the stakes." He stopped, his pale face inches from Grimnar's snarling wolf-pelt helmet. "Your sentimentality is a weakness that could doom this entire segmentum. You saved their bodies. I am here to save our species. You are a tool, Grimnar, a blunt instrument. And your work here is done. You will stand down. Your jurisdiction ends at the hull of your ship. This is a matter for the Ordo Malleus." Interfere, his voice dropped to a deadly whisper, "and you will find that your great chapter is but one more line item in the tithe. Your protection is treason." There was a long, frozen moment. The growl in Grimnar's chest subsided, replaced by a chilling calm. He had heard enough. He looked past Gesgust to the silent, silver-armored Grey Knight. "And you, Kisnar, son of Titan Grimnar's voice was quiet. You fought with us. You saw their courage. You will stand by and watch this shame. You will be his butcher." Lord Prognosticator Kisner's face was rigid. He did not meet Grimnar's eyes. "My Lord Grimnar, our oath is absolute. The taint must be purged. The logic is sound. We will do what must be done." Grimnar stared at him, the last hope of an ally evaporating. "Then you are all damned." The Great Wolf turned his back on the Inquisitor, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. "You are commanded to remain." Lord Grimnar Geskust's voice was sharp, cracking with authority. Grimnar paused at the threshold, his back still to the room. He looked over his massive armored shoulder, his eyes invisible within the shadow of his helm, but his voice promising millennia of war. "I am the Great Wolf. I am the King of Fenris. I command myself." He swept out of the chamber. His wolf guard fell in around him, their own weapons hot, their eyes mirroring the fury of their lord. Bror Grimnar voxed as he strode across the ash back towards the Space Wolf lines, his cape billowing behind him like a storm cloud. "Summon the Wolf Lords, all of them, to the Hrafnkel." "Aye, Great Wolf," his second's voice crackled in return. "The mead halls. The mead halls will be silent." Grimnar growled, his gaze rising to the black inquisitorial ships that now owned the sky. "There is no celebration, only war." The inquisitorial cleansing began with terrifying speed. The black-armored Tempestus Scions, supported by newly arrived regiments of brutal Cadian shock troops, who knew only obedience descended upon the sprawling refugee settlements. They were no longer camps, they were processing zones. The air, already thick with the smell of ash and chemicals, now carried the antiseptic stench of mass medical procedure and the acrid smoke of promethium incinerators burning whatever possessions the survivors had managed to save. The people were herded by the thousands into long, prefabricated medici tents. There was no malice in the faces of the inquisitorial surgeons and servitors, only a chilling bureaucratic efficiency. Ilara, the young woman who had seen her supervisor transform, was shoved into a processing line. She watched the woman in front of her, a stout agri-worker, get strapped to a metal table. A multi-limbed servo skull whirred down its optical lens, glowing red. It administered a single high-pressure injection to her neck. The woman didn't even have time to scream, she just went limp. A servitor with crude metallic claws then performed a rapid brutalist procedure. It was over in 30 seconds, sterilized, branded, processed. Next, a scion barked, shoving Ilara forward. She stumbled, her mind numb. This was not salvation. This was not the gratitude of a saved Imperium. This was pest control. Outside, she could hear the Vox announcements, a cold, synthesized voice, explaining that they were being prepared for resettlement for their own protection. It was the same voice that had announced the interdiction, but in the vast, wrecked anchorage of Hive Tartarus, something else was stirring. Not all of Armageddon's survivors were passive. Jax the foreman had found others, engineers, void workers, and former Navy ratings who had been grounded when the war began. They had been whispering in the dark, and their whispers had found an unlikely ear. Scaled Ironpelt, an iron priest of the Space Wolves, had been tasked with salvaging wrecked Lehman Russ tanks. His real work, however, was subversive. He could not, by his honor, allow this. While his servitors hammered at tank treads, Skjold had accidentally left a datalsate containing the activation codes for the Tartarus orbital cargo lifters unattended. He had failed to secure a warehouse full of void suits and ration packs. He worked in the shadows, his actions a quiet rebellion, his disgust at the Inquisition a cold fire in his gut. Under the cover of a toxic dust storm, Jax and his group, now numbering almost 10,000, moved. They slipped past the inquisitorial patrols using maintenance tunnels Skjold's augurs had mapped for them and stormed the orbital docks. They were armed with Lascutter's rivet guns and a desperate suicidal courage. They overwhelmed the skeleton crew of Navy ratings men who were already conflicted about their new masters. They seized a motley collection of vessels, 5 massive, slow-moving bulk freighters, a dozen short-haul system shuttles, and a single ancient decommissioned Cobra-class destroyer that was in dry dock for repairs. It was a fleet of rust buckets, civilian ships never meant to see combat, let alone break a blockade of inquisitorial warships. "We have the destroyer Jax," yelled into his vox, his voice hoarse with terror and triumph. "We have the Honorable Perseverance. She has torpedo tubes. By the throne, she still has torpedoes." "Get the engines hot," an ex-Navy rating shouted back, her hands flying over a console. "I can't promise the Geller field will hold for more than a minute, but it might be enough." They powered up the engines, the ancient reactors groaning to life. The entire dock shuddered. They didn't wait for clearance. They didn't wait for a clean launch window. They simply burned skyward, a desperate arrow of civilian hulls, blasting through the upper atmosphere, pushing past the orbital debris of the war. High above on the bridge of the inquisitorial flagship Solanus, a klaxon blared. "My Lord Gesgust," an officer reported, his voice tight. "Unauthorized launch from Tartarus anchorage. Multiple vessels. Civilian signatures. They are on a direct vector for the Mandeville point." Gesgust did not even look up from his data slate. "Admiral," he spoke to the Imperial Navy commander on his bridge. "You will enforce the quarantine. Target those vessels. Destroy them." "My lord, they are civilian ships," the Admiral protested weakly. 10,000 souls. "They are contaminated," Gesgust said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "And they are in breach of my interdiction. Destroy them, or you will be relieved of command and executed for treason. Your choice." The Admiral swallowed, his face pale. He turned to his crew. "All batteries, lock on to the rogue fleet." The trap sprung. Imperial Navy cruisers, sleek and grey, moved to intercept. Warning shots of searing lance fire lanced across the bows of the lead freighter. On the bridge of the Honorable Perseverance, Jax watched his auger screen light up with a constellation of enemy contacts. They were trapped. He stared at the Vox, his hand trembling. There was no hope, but he had to try. He slammed his fist onto the broadcast rune, opening every possible channel from the Navy command frequencies to the Space Wolf tactical nets. He poured all his despair, all his fear, and all his righteous fury into one last, desperate plea. "This is Jax of Armageddon. We are survivors. We are loyal. We are not criminals. We are the people you saved. We are—" His voice cracked. "We beg you, the angels of death, the silver ones, the great wolves of the Sky King. You saved us from the demon. Do not let the Inquisitor kill us. Do not let this be for nothing. In the Emperor's name, help us. We are loyal. Help us." On the silver and adamantium command deck of the Grey Knight's strike cruiser, Sword of Titan Jax's plea echoed. It was not a whisper, but a raw, unfiltered shriek of human terror filling the purified air with its mundane horror. Lord Prognosticator Kisnar stood immobile, his hands clasped behind his back. His Aegis armor reflected the muted green light of the tactical displays. He could see the small green icons of the refugee fleet, desperately racing for the emerald swirl of the Mandeville point. He could also see the closing predatory red icons of the Imperial Navy cruisers moving to intercept. "My lord," his second Justica Orion spoke, his voice filtered by the Vox grill of his helm. "Those pleas, they are clean. There is no psychic resonance. No demonic taint. Corruption does not always scream," Justica Kaisnar replied, his voice low and weary, heavy with the burden of centuries. "It whispers." The moment was shattered as the Vox channel was overridden. Jax's desperate screaming was sliced off, replaced by the cold, precise, and utterly passionless voice of Gesgust broadcasting from the Solanus. "Lord Prognosticator Kisnar, the targets are attempting to breach the cordon. The Navy's orders have been given. Now you will fulfill your duty." Gesgust's voice held no anger, only the chilling certainty of a surgeon. "This infection will not be allowed to spread. You will enact Supreme Edict 344 Alpha. The order is Exterminatus Diaboli. Destroy them all. Not one soul escapes. Exterminatus Diaboli, the cleansing of the devil. An order Kisnar had enacted 100 times against festering cults, demon worlds, and possessed vessels. Now it was leveled at 10,000 terrified civilians whose only weapon was a prayer. The Grey Knight's torment was not like that of the Space Wolf. It was not hot, righteous, and indignant. It was cold, logical, and heavy as a lead shroud upon his immortal soul. Kisner understood Gesgurst's logic. He had dedicated his entire unnaturally long life, sacrificing his very name and past to fight this secret war. He had seen a single half-remembered whisper, a fleeting memory of a greater demon fester in a planet's populace for decades, rotting it from within until it was a hollow shell of damnation. He had personally executed innocent survivors of demonic incursions 10 years later, after they had become insane, drooling prophets of ruin, unwitting portals for the archenemy's return. Gesgurst was by the cold, terrible calculus of their holy duty correct. His oath to the Ordo Malleus was absolute. Emotion was a vector, compassion was a poisoned blade. But my Lord Orion pressed his voice tight with a plea that bordered on the heretical they fought. We witnessed it. They held the line at the Forge complex when the bloodletters. They saw Kisnar interrupted his voice, now devoid of all warmth, a flat expanse of ice. And that is sufficient. What is seen cannot be unseen. They are psychic time bombs, Justicar. We are the ones who must defuse them. He turned to the arms master, his flicker of hesitation crushed beneath the monolithic weight of 1,000 years of duty. Target refugee flotilla. Full firing solution. Lock torpedoes. On the tactical display, the Imperial Navy cruisers opened fire first. Searing lances of pure energy, bright as novas, slashed through the void. They struck one of the lumbering bulk freighters. The ship did not explode. It simply dissolved, its reactor core breached. A silent, expanding cloud of debris ice and instantly frozen atmosphere was all that remained of 3,000 souls. The refugee fleet scattered in pure, abject panic. Jax's honorable perseverance bravely swung about its frail hull, attempting to shield the others, launching a single, futile spread of torpedoes at the Imperial cruisers. They are approaching the jump point. My Lord the Grey Knight Armsmaster reported, his gauntleted hand hovering over the firing rune. Sir, Kisner stared at the scene. Innocent survivors. A merciless logic. A sacred oath. He had made his choice. The only one he could. Fire, he commanded, his voice a bare whisper of resignation. The Sword of Titan did not fight. It executed. Its torpedo bays opened, loosing not conventional warheads, but purification torpedoes. Each missile was a physical prayer of annihilation, packed with psychoreactive chemicals and inscribed with wards of abjuration silver bolts of sanctified death. When they struck the refugee vessels, the effect was horrific. They did not merely detonate, they cleansed. Bursts of blinding silver-white-blue fire erupted, a sanctified flame that incinerated not just hull and flesh, but the very soul stuff within. The ships were torn asunder by a holy energy they could not comprehend. On Jax's open Vox channel, the screaming reached a final, unbearable crescendo of madness, then cut out, replaced by the roar of pure psychic static. The Honorable Perseverance was struck by 3 torpedoes at once. Its spine shattered. Jax's bridge became a miniature silver sun. In the millisecond before he and his crew were atomized, his desperate plea became a single, choked gasp of utter, uncomprehending betrayal. In less than a minute, it was over. The patch of space where the refugee fleet had been was now just a glittering, drifting cloud of debris. It was silent, clean, purified. On the bridge of the Sword of Titan, Justica Orion turned away from the main view screen, unable to watch. Kisner remained motionless, a statue of silver, but inside his gauntlets his hands were clenched so tightly that the ceramite joints groaned in protest. Targets! Targets eliminated, the Armsmaster reported, his voice shaking within his helm. No life signs remain. My lord. Kisner nodded, a slow, heavy, mechanical gesture. We have done what must be done. May the Emperor forgive us. Aboard the Hrafenkel, the flagship of the Vilka Fenrika, the command bridge was silent. It was not the sterile silence of the Grey Knight's vessel. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a predator stalking its prey, the quiet before the kill. The bridge was a cavern of dark iron and glowing runes, the air thick with the smell of machine oil ozone and the faint, musky scent of the wolves themselves. Jax's final desperate plea, followed by the chilling Exterminatus Diaboli, had been broadcast across all channels. They had heard it all. They had watched the tactical display as the green icons of the refugee fleet were systematically clinically erased from existence by the silver bolts of the Grey Knights and the lances of the Imperial Navy. The tactical screen flickered, showing only the expanding cloud of debris. The Vox was silent, the screaming cut off. Bror Thunderfist, his hand clenched around the hilt of his chainsword, let out a low, strangled sound, half groan, half growl. The other wolf lords on the bridge, massive figures in Terminator plate, their faces etched with disbelief and a building, terrible rage, looked to their king. Logan Grimner sat on his high command throne, his ancient eyes fixed on the display. He did not move. He did not breathe. He was a statue of ancestral fury, and the silence on his bridge stretched for 1 second. 2, 10. Then he spoke. "They dare," he whispered. The word was a rumble, a seismic event beginning deep within his chest. He rose from his throne not with the quickness of a young warrior, but with the ponderous, unstoppable weight of an avalanche. He was the old wolf, the Vulcakin, the High King of Fenris, and he had just borne witness to an act of profound, unforgivable dishonor. "They dare!" he said again, louder, his voice cracking with a sudden terrible energy. He stepped down to the central command dais, his every step a hammer blow. The bridge crew, mortal and Astartes alike, flinched from the raw power rolling off him in waves. This was not just anger. This was the weird, the killing rage of a Primarch's son. "They hunt demons!" he roared, sweeping his gaze across his wolf lords. "But they have become the monsters. They purge the unclean while wallowing in the worst sin of all, cowardice, murder. They have slaughtered the very people we swore to protect." His blue eyes, no longer cold, now burned with a white-hot Fenrisian fire. He stabbed a gauntleted finger at the tactical display where the black-hulled inquisitorial fleet and their silver and grey escorts hung in their arrogant, victorious formation. "This is not the Imperium we serve." Grimner's voice dropped to a lethal growl, a promise of absolute retribution. "This is not the All-Father's will. This is the work of craven, hollow men who have forgotten what honor is." He strode to the Master Voxhelm, Shipmaster Open Channel, fleet-wide, every ship in my command. "My lord," the shipmaster stammered, his face pale to broadcast what the Inquisition monitors all. "They will hear this," Grimner snarled, seizing the Vox handset himself. His voice boomed through the speakers of every Space Wolf vessel in orbit, from the battle barge Claw of Russ to the fast strike cruisers Winterfang and Ironpelt. Sons of Leman Russ, children of Fenris. Every warrior on every deck stopped. They heard the rage in their lord's voice. They heard the call to war. Before you is a new enemy. They do not carry the mark of the traitor. They do not howl the name of the ruinous powers. They wear the sigil of the Imperium. They wear the silver of holy terror. And they have just murdered 10,000 loyal subjects of the Emperor in cold blood. A collective rising growl sounded over the Vox from 100 different decks. "We have fought the daemon. Now we fight the true monsters. Geskust and his butchers believe their authority is absolute. They believe their cold logic makes them right. We will show them the logic of the Vilca Fenrica. We will show them the price of dishonor." Grimner pointed his gaze out the view screen as if he could see Geskust himself. "Gunnery commanders, lock your primary targets. The black-hulled vessels, the Solanus, the ships of the Inquisition." There was a collective gasp, a moment of shocked hesitation from his bridge crew. This was not just rebellion. This was civil war. Great Wolf. Bror started, that is. That is the path of the heretic. No, Grimner roared, turning on him. "This is the path of honor. To stand by and watch this shame makes us heretics. To allow this makes us traitors to the All-Father's dream. We are his executioners, not his accountants. We will not stand by." He turned back to the Vox. His decision made his fate sealed. "All ships full power to engines. Our course is through them. We will fight our way to the remaining camps. We will take the survivors we can find, and we will shield them with our hulls and our lives." He paused, then gave the final history-altering command. "We will take these people to Fenris, or we will die showing them what true loyalty looks in its final glorious moments. Farewelka Fenrika for Russ and the Allfather." The response was not a disciplined "Aye, my lord." It was a singular, deafening roar, the howl of 10,000 wolves unleashed. It was the sound of the weird taking them all. The Hrafnkel's colossal engines ignited, burning a fierce, defiant blue in the void. Across the orbital plane, the entire Space Wolf fleet came to life. They did not maneuver. They did not posture. They charged. The Inquisitorial fleet, still complacent in its execution, was caught by surprise. "My lord," the augur officer on the Solanus shouted. "The Space Wolf fleet. They are accelerating on an attack vector." Geskust looked up, his cold amusement fading into disbelief. "They dare..." The first shots of the war were fired by the Hrafnkel. Its dorsal macro batteries unleashed a deafening broadside, not at the Navy, but at the Grey Knight cruiser Sword of Titan. The void shields of Kisnar's ship flared brilliantly as the shells impacted a defiant challenge. Simultaneously, the Space Wolf strike cruisers, faster and more agile, howled past the lumbering Imperial Navy vessels, their weapons batteries blazing. They were not aiming to destroy the Navy ships, but to disable them, to force them aside. The battle between Astartes and Astartes, between the Emperor's wolves and the Emperor's demon hunters, had begun. The space above Armageddon, still scarred by the psychic echo of Angren's rage, became a new hell. A hell of warring brothers. The void erupted. The space between the planets, already a graveyard of the war against Angron, became a chaotic hellscape of muzzle flashes, lance beams, and torpedo contrails. This was not a war of strategy. It was a brawl, a desperate close-range melee fought at velocities that defied comprehension. The Imperial Navy ships, caught between their inquisitorial masters and the sudden berserk charge of the Space Wolves, were in disarray. Their admirals hesitated, their gunnery crews reluctant to fire on the heroes who had just saved the planet. But the Grey Knights had no such compunctions. The Sword of Titan, its shields buckling under the Hrafnkel's opening salvo, returned fire with chilling precision. Its dorsal batteries unleashed a stream of psychoactively guided shells that sought not the ship's hull, but its Geller field generators. Kisner knew that Grimner's goal was not victory but escape. He would not allow it. Boarding torpedoes, Kisner ordered, his voice flat. "Target the Hrafnkel's launch bays. Stop them from deploying ground assets. Orion, lead the assault. We will cut the head from the beast." On the Hrafnkel, alarms blared. Incoming torpedoes, Grey Knight signatures, brace for impact. The Hrafnkel shuddered violently as the assault torpedoes struck home their melter warheads, breaching the heavily armored hull. On deck 4, a squad of Wolfguard, their axes ready, watched as the adamantium bulkhead glowed cherry red, then burst inward. From the smoke and fire, 5 figures emerged. They were giants of silver, their Terminator armor immaculate, their eyes glowing with a righteous blue-white psychic light. Nemesis Force halberds were active, their blades thrumming with disruptive energy. For the Emperor and Titan Justica, Orion roared his first bolt shell from his wrist-mounted storm bolter, obliterating the head of a Wolfguard. For Fenris, the Space Wolf pack leader howled in return, intercepting Orion's charge with his own thunderhammer. The corridor erupted in a clash of titans. It was a fight of brutal intimacy, a butcher's bill paid in ceramite and bone. These were not demons or aliens. This was brother against brother. A Grey Knight parried a Wolfguard's frost axe, his psychic defenses deflecting the killing blow, only to be torn apart by a second Wolfguard charging from the flank, his wolf claws tearing through the Aegis armor's joints. A Grey Knight purifier unleashed a torrent of psychic flame, cleansing fire, incinerating 2 wolves where they stood. Before he could repeat the incantation, The wolf-pack leader, his own armor smoking, buried his thunderhammer in the Grey Knight's chest, the impact's energy field vaporizing the warrior's torso. The fight was savage, personal, and utterly tragic. Every combatant knew they were killing one of the Imperium's finest, and they did it anyway, driven by opposing, irreconcilable duties. In the void, the battle was just as desperate. The faster Space Wolf cruisers Winterfang and Ironpelt raced past the inquisitorial line, their guns blazing. They formed a moving shield, a curtain of iron and fire between the planet's surface and Geskust's fleet. Their goal was to buy time. "Thunderhawks away!" Grimnar roared on the bridge. "Go get to the camps. Take every soul you can carry. We will hold this hole open for you." From the scarred launch bays of the Hrafnkel and its consort squadrons of Thunderhawk gunships, painted in the storm grey of the wolves, plunged into the atmosphere. They bypassed the orbital battle, their engines burning at maximum thrust, on a desperate rescue mission to the processing zones below. "They are launching transports," the tactical officer on the Solanus reported to Geskust. The Inquisitor's face was a mask of cold fury. He had not anticipated this. The wolves' suicidal, honor-bound charge was illogical and therefore unpredictable. "Target the gunships," Geskust ordered, "and concentrate fire on the Hrafnkel. I want Grimnar's head. I want his ship's spine broken." The Solanus, a ship with the firepower of a small fleet, turned its ponderous might upon Grimnar's flagship. Its colossal lance batteries fired beams of light, brighter than a sun slicing through the void. The Hrafnkel's shields flared, glowed, and then collapsed. One beam struck the prow, shearing away meters of adamantium. Another hit the port weapons bay, causing a catastrophic series of internal explosions. The great ship listed, wounded, its bridge crew thrown from their stations. "Damage critical!" the shipmaster yelled. Smoke and sparks filling the bridge. "We've lost main power to port batteries. Shield generators are offline." Logan Grimnar hauled himself back to his throne, his armor smoking. He looked at the tactical display. His fleet was taking a beating. They were outnumbered 10-1, and the Grey Knights were fighting with a cold, terrifying efficiency. But his Thunderhawks were through. They were descending, Bror Grimnar voxed. "Divert all power from starboard engines to the void shields. We are not a spear. We are a shield. Hold this position. Hold it or die on your feet." The Space Wolf fleet contracted, forming a tight defensive semicircle, their broadsides facing the combined Inquisitorial and Navy fleets. They had become a fortress in the void, a wall of defiance, bleeding energy, and lives to protect the few ships still trying to escape, and the Thunderhawks now descending to the planet's surface. They were buying minutes at the cost of their own blood. On the obsidian bridge of the Solanus Lord Inquisitor, Geskust watched the tactical display, his pale face a mask of incandescent rage. The Hrafnkel was wounded, its void shields gone, its hull bleeding atmosphere, yet it still held the line. Its batteries continued to fire a defiant howl of macro shell and lance fire. Grimnar's Thunderhawks were deep in the planet's atmosphere, and the Inquisitor's own ground forces were too busy with the processing to intercept them all. This was no longer a simple quarantine, it was an armed insurrection, a personal dishonorable affront to his authority. "He defies me!" Geskust hissed, his voice so cold it seemed to draw the heat from the air. "The feral cur dares to raise his hand against the Ordo Malleus. He has made his choice." His own Grey Knight contingent was bogged down in brutal deck-by-deck warfare aboard the Space Wolf vessels, a costly and inefficient use of such elite assets. The Navy admirals were hesitant, their volleys conveniently inaccurate, their fear of the Astartes outweighing their fear of him. He needed a new tool, a blunt instrument, one without compunction, without mercy, and without any shared history of valor with the Sons of Russ. He turned to his astropathic sanctum, the hooded figures within, already swaying, sensing their master's will. "Transmit," Geskust commanded, his voice a psychic lance. "Priority Ultima. Augment with my full authority. To the chapter master of the Red Hunters Victorus, your tithe is called. The chapter Vilca Fenrica is declared excommunicate traitoris. The Poena Mortis is enacted. I want Lord Grimnar. I want his ships. I want his chapter's gene seed. Purge them from the stars. The message, supercharged with Gisgust's cold fury, screamed into the Imperium. The reply was not a Vox message. It was an arrival. As if they had been lurking in the system's dark, waiting for the call, a new jagged tear opened in the fabric of reality at the Mandeville Point. The translation was not a careful emergence. It was an aggressive, predatory lunge. A new fleet, 19 vessels strong, punched into real space. They were painted a deep arterial red, the color of dried blood. Their hulls were angular, brutalist, and bore no campaign markings or ancient honors. They bore only one sigil repeated ad nauseam, the stark eye of the Inquisition clutched in a crimson gauntlet. These were the Red Hunters, whispered of in the secretive halls of other chapters. They were a force created for a single terrifying purpose. They were not just loyal to the Inquisition. They were rumored to have been created by it, a chapter of Astartes, designed, bred, and indoctrinated to be the ultimate sanction to hunt other space marines. They were the Emperor's attack dogs, leashed only by the Ordo Malleus. Their fleet-wide vox crackled to life, a synthesized, fanatical voice that cut across all channels, overriding the din of battle. We are the Victoris Tally. We answer the call of the Holy Ordos. All vessels marked Canis Helix are declared anathema. The death penalty is invoked. Submit to judgment or face the fire. The Red Hunters did not wait for a reply. They did not form a battle line. They simply charged. On the Hrafnkel's bridge, the tactical display flared with a new tide of red icons. New contacts, Great Wolf, the Augur officer shouted, his console exploding in warning runes. They are Astartes' red livery. They are on a full attack vector, engaging our port flank. The Red Hunter fleet, led by the battle barge Righteous Sanction, did not engage in a duel of broadsides. They were specialists in ship-to-ship slaughter. They plowed directly into the battered Space Wolf defensive line, their engines at maximum burn. The Righteous Sanction smashed into the Space Wolf strike cruiser Ironpelt, a ship already heavily damaged from its fight with the Navy. The Red Hunter vessel fired its macro batteries at point-blank range, a single devastating volley that tore the Ironpelt's spine apart. Simultaneously, dozens of assault torpedoes and boarding rams, their prows shaped like inquisitorial eyes, lanced out, punching deep into the crippled wolf ship. The Ironpelt is breached. We are boarded. The last Vox transmission from the ship's captain screamed before being cut off by a burst of static and the sound of bolter fire. They fight like... By Russ, the battle for the void above Armageddon had just become a hopeless slaughter. Grimnar's fleet was now hopelessly, completely encircled. In front, the massive, hesitant guns of the Imperial Navy. To starboard, the cold, lethal, and psychically charged ships of the Grey Knights. And now, tearing into their ruined port, flank the fanatical, suicidal tide of the Red Hunters. We are trapped, Lord Braw Thunderfist roared, his faceplate cracked, his axe slick with the blood of a Grey Knight. We cannot hold them all. Logan Grimnar watched the Ironpelt vent its atmosphere, its reactor core breached and glowing with a deadly white light. It was gone. 1,000 of his sons gone. The defiance in his eyes hardened into a terrible, cold resolve. His gamble to save the civilians had cost him a ship and its crew. Then we will not hold, Grimnar growled, his voice dropping to a grim promise. We will die, but we will die as wolves. He activated the fleet-wide Vox, his voice cutting through the panic. All ships hear me. The Routh-Filgia, the last stand. We will carve a path of our brother's blood to Fenris, or we will meet them in the halls of the Allfather. Prepare for the final charge. Show these dogs how the Vilka Fenrika die. On the battered bridge of the Hrafnkel, the tactical display was a tapestry of doom. The Ironpelt was dead, its reactor chain, reacting in silent nuclear detonations. The Claw of Russ was crippled, being torn apart by the Righteous Sanction's boarding parties. Logan Grimnar's fleet, the pride of Fenris, was reduced to 3 operational battle cruisers, and they were all on fire. But through the smoke and alarm screech, a new string of green icons appeared on the main screen. My lord the augur officer yelled, his console flashing. "The Thunderhawks, they are returning. They are docking with the remaining transports, the Skjold and the Freki. They are making for our own launch bays." The gunships, their hulls pockmarked with flak bursts, plunged into the Hrafnkel's cavernous hangars, ignoring the screaming bulkheads and plasma fires. They were not carrying warriors. They were carrying thousands of shocked, huddled civilians. The last lucky few pulled from the processing zones before they could be purged. Logan Grimner stared at the Red Hunter fleet, now wheeling about for another attack run, their guns glowing with fanaticism. He had taken the Routh Filgia, the last stand. But now, with refugees on board, the objective had changed. This was not a glorious death. This was an escape. To the Skjold and the Freki, Grimnar roared, his voice cutting through the shriek of his dying ship. "You have your cargo. You have our people. Engage warp drives, now." But Great Wolf, the Skjold's captain, yelled in reply, his voice tinny with static. "The preparations. The Geller field is unstable. We need more time. We cannot leave you. That is an order." Grimnar bellowed. "No coordinates, no calculation, jump blind to wherever the Imperium takes you. Get them out of here at any cost." He turned to his shipmaster, who was trying to beat out a console fire with his bare hands. "The Inquisitorial fleet is massing on us. They think we are the threat. We will be the threat. Aboard the Solanus." Geskust saw the warp signatures forming around the two smaller Space Wolf escorts. "Do not let them escape!" he shrieked. "All vessels concentrate fire on those transports. Tear them apart!" The combined Inquisitorial Grey Knight and Red Hunter fleets turned their weapons as one. "No, you will not," Grimnar whispered. He seized the ship's main helm, pushing the mortal shipmaster aside. "All remaining power to the main engines. We are the shield." The massive burning wreck of the Hrafnkel roared one final time. It did not retreat. It charged. It lunged forward, placing its colossal bulk directly between the enemy's guns and the two escaping transports. It was an act of pure suicidal defiance. The Hrafnkel became the nexus of annihilation. Lance-fire torpedoes and macro shells from 3 fleets slammed into its ruined armor. Explosions tore through its decks. Entire gun batteries went silent. The bridge was plunged into fire and black smoke as bulkheads buckled. "The Skjold!" She's jumped, the augur officer screamed through the flames, blood pouring from beneath his helm. "The Freki, she has jumped. They are clear, my lord, they are gone." Through the cracked and blistering view screen, Grimnar saw the 2 emerald blue rips in reality, as the refugee ships tore their way into the Imperium. He had done it. Thousands were saved. He slumped back onto his command throne, the ship shuddering apart around him. Bror report," he wheezed. Bror Thunderfist dragged himself from a pile of rubble, one side of his body charred black. All weapons decks are silent. Engines, critical. We are done, my lord." Grimnar looked at the display where Geskust's fleet, furious at the deception, was closing in for the killing blow. No, Grimnar growled. "Not yet. One last run. Engage the warp drive." "My lord," the shipmaster shrieked, his voice pure panic. "We can't, the core is unstable. It will kill us, the safety protocols." "Damn the safety protocols," Grimnar roared, rising to his feet, his great form an icon of defiance. "If we die moving forward. Take us home or take us to the Allfather's halls. Jump." The shipmaster, with a yell that was half obedience and half terror, slammed his fist onto the emergency translation rune. Aboard the Solanus, Geskust was preparing to give the final fire order when the ravaged hulk of the Hrafnkel suddenly convulsed. Not from an explosion. A sick blue-black light began to sheathe its hull. Space itself began to warp violently around it. "They are initiating an uncontrolled translation," Geskust's tactical officer screamed. With a sound that tore reality, the Hrafnkel dissolved into unreal light and vanished, leaving a bleeding, distorted scar in the void. Silence fell over the battlefield. Geskust's fleet drifted amid the wreckage of 2 Space Wolf cruisers, but his primary target was gone. The traitor. The refugees. Gone. Lord Inquisitor Geskust stood motionless on his bridge. his armored hand clenched so tightly that the Ceramite groaned. He had won the orbital battle, but Logan Grimnar had won the moral one and had escaped. The shame was absolute. "Find them, Giscust," whispered his voice, a cold promise of centuries of vengeance. "Declare the excommunicate traitoris. The hunt begins." The voxnet across the entire segmentum obscurus crackled to life with a new chilling decree. It was broadcast from every inquisitorial fortress, every Navy command nexus, and every astropathic choir under Giscust's influence. The Lord Inquisitor's voice, cold, precise, and amplified by the full authority of the Ordo Malleus, was absolute. "Let it be known, by the authority of the Holy Orders of the Emperor's Inquisition, the Astartes chapter Vilca Fenrica, known as the Space Wolves, is declared excommunicate traitoris." The words hung in the void, a death sentence for an entire legion of heroes. For acts of armed insurrection against the Imperium's authority, for the grievous murder of loyal Imperial servants, for trafficking with the contaminated, and for aiding the escape of vectors of demonic plague, their blasphemy is absolute. Their chapter master, Logan Grimnar, is declared hostis humani, enemy of mankind. A poena mortis is issued. His life is forfeit. His chapter's gene seed is to be seized and destroyed. The broadcast was repeated again and again. "All Imperial forces, Adeptus Astartes, Adeptus Mechanicus, and Imperial Navy are hereby commanded to hunt and destroy all vessels bearing the Fenrisian sigil. The Red Hunters chapter victorious. Tally shall lead this righteous crusade of vengeance. There will be no parley, no quarter, no mercy. The Emperor's judgment is at hand." For the battered remnants of Logan Grimnar's fleet, the Imperium was no refuge. The Hrafnkel's uncontrolled jump had saved them from immediate annihilation, but it had come at a terrible price. They translated back into real space with a gut-wrenching lurch, their systems screaming their ship a barely living corpse. They were in the dark, uncharted space of the Garan Nebula, thousands of light years from Armageddon. The Hrafnkel was a wreck. Its port side was a gaping, cauterized wound. Its engines were dead. The mortal crew was decimated. On the bridge, Bror Thunderfist and Logan Grimnar, their armor cracked and blackened, worked alongside their iron priests just to keep the atmosphere from venting into the void. "We are blind," the Iron Priest growled, his servo arms sparking. "Augurs are down. Astropathic choir is gone. Half of them were killed in the translation." "Then we will be the Allfather's eyes," Grimnar said, his voice a rasp. He stood a giant of defiance amid the ruins of his bridge. "We are wolves. We hunt best in the dark." But they were not the only hunters. Their first warning was a flash of crimson in the nebula's gas clouds. A Red Hunter's strike cruiser, the Inexorable, had anticipated their jump vector using forbidden inquisitorial arts of prognostication. It emerged from the mist, its batteries blazing, its vox screaming litanies of hate. "Die traitors, die for your sins." The Hrafnkel was a sitting duck. It couldn't fight, it couldn't run. All remaining Thunderhawks, Grimnar roared. "Launch! Buy us time, Iron Priests! I do not care how, get that warp drive online! We need one more jump!" The last of Grimnar's elite Wolfguard, leading squads of Fenrisian-born crew, launched their gunships in a suicidal charge against the Astartes cruiser. They were gnats attacking a lion, their storm bolters rattling harmlessly off its void shields. But they were a distraction. The Inexorable was forced to divert its close-in defense turrets to deal with the gunships, giving the Hrafnkel's enginarium the precious seconds it needed. As the last Thunderhawk was swatted from the sky in a ball of flame, the Hrafnkel's engines sputtered, caught, and then roared with a sick, wounded sound. With another lurch that shattered bulkheads, the ship plunged back into the warp, leaving the Red Hunters screaming in their wake. So it went for weeks, a desperate, agonizing flight. They jumped from one dead system to the next, emerging only to make frantic, desperate repairs, their supplies dwindling, their wounded dying in the cold corridors. They were hounded at every turn. They were ambushed at the Zeist Mandeville Point by an Imperial Navy patrol loyal to Giscust's decree. They fought a running, desperate battle through an asteroid field against 3 more Red Hunter frigates. They could not rest. They could not repair. They could not mourn their dead. They were pariahs, the most hated beings in the galaxy, hunted by the very Imperium they had given everything to protect. The wolves were bleeding, exhausted, and running out of time. They were no longer the glorious sons of Russ. They were fugitives, and their only path was home to Fenris. The Hrafnkel was a ghost. It limped into the Fenris system, its hull a patchwork of emergency seals and raw, gaping wounds. It was venting atmosphere from a dozen decks, its engines a barely contained howl of agony. But it was home. The system's binary stars, the pale blue-white Wolfen, and the dull, angry red of its dark twin, bathed the ruined battle barge in a familiar, cold light. Below them lay Fenris, a sphere of lethal ice-capped mountains and magma-scarred continents shrouded in storms. The ship broadcast a single ancient recognition code, a string of guttural Fenrisian, Heimta, home. The relief on the bridge was a palpable thing. Bror Thunderfist actually sagged against a console, his good eye closing. We made it, Great Wolf. Logan Grimner stood at the shattered viewscreen, his gaze fixed on the jewel of his kingdom, the colossal mountain-sized fortress of the Fang. Aye, he breathed. We are. My lord. The augur officer, his face a mask of dried blood, interrupted, his voice cracking with new, sudden terror. Multiple translations, directly behind us. Dozens, no, hundreds of contacts. They've followed us. Grimner's eyes snapped open. He didn't need the augur. He could see it. Tearing into real space, a vast encircling net of ships came the enemy. At its head, the black, monolithic arrogance of the Solanus. Fanning out on its flanks, the arterial red of the Red Hunters, their numbers now swelled to a full battle fleet. And lagging slightly, their silver hulls gleaming with cold, reluctant purpose, came the strike cruisers of the Grey Knights, led by the Sword of Titan. Geskust had not just followed them. He had brought his entire armada. This was not a pursuit. It was an invasion. The Inquisitorial fleet did not charge. It deployed. With chilling, perfect precision, the black ships of the Ordo Malleus, the red ships of the Hunters, and the grey ships of the Navy formed a perfect layered sphere of interdiction around the planet of Fenris. Every orbital path, every escape vector, every stable Mandeville point was bracketed by guns. They did not fire. They simply waited, a cage of adamantium and macro cannon aimed at the heart of the Space Wolves' domain. Then Geskust's voice amplified to a level that shook the battered hull of the Hrafnkel broadcast across the entire system, aimed not at Grimner but at the Fang itself. Hear me, inhabitants of Fenris. I am Lord Inquisitor Gesquest of the Ordo Malleus. The chapter you harbor has been declared excommunicate traitoris. Your world is now under blockade. His voice was devoid of emotion, a pronouncement of judgment. You have one recourse to avoid total war and planetary sanction. Surrender the traitor Logan Grimnar. Surrender his command staff. Surrender the entirety of your gene seed stock for purification. And surrender any and all contaminated refugees you have illegally harbored. He paused, letting the threat hang in the cold void. You will submit your chapter to the judgment of the Inquisition. Refuse, and this system will be purged. Your fortress will become your tomb. The silence that followed was absolute. On the Hrafnkel, Grimner's men looked to their lord, their faces grim. They were trapped, their ship, a coffin caught between the hammer and the anvil. But they were not the only wolves in the system. The response came not from the Hrafnkel, but from the planet below. First, a flicker of energy from the upper atmosphere, then another. Then a dozen colossal structures, dormant for centuries, blazed to life in high orbit. They were the Aegis Line defense platforms, ancient orbital fortresses the size of small moons, their myriad weapon batteries turning as one to face the Inquisitorial fleet. From the massive cavernous space docks carved deep into the ice of the Fang itself, new signatures blazed. The Fenrisian Home Guard, the Varigya, a fleet of cruisers and destroyers that had not been at Armageddon, emerged like wolves from their den. They were fresh, fully armed, and they moved to form a defensive shield around their wounded king. Finally, the Vox crackled to life, but it was not Grimnar's voice. It was 1,000 voices at once, the collective defiant growl of an entire chapter, unified and ancient. And booming over all of them, a voice like the grinding of glaciers, the voice of a being who had seen terror itself. The Vox of Bjorn the Fell-Handed broadcasting from his dreadnought sarcophagus deep within the Fang. So, the little lapdogs have found their bark. The voice of the revered dreadnought cut through Geskust's authority like a frost axe through bone. Inquisitor, you come to the home of Leman Russ. You come to the heart of the Vilka Fenrika. You come bearing demands and threats wrapped in a stolen sigil. You hunt heroes and call it justice. You are a fool. The broadcast shifted, and now it was Logan Grimnar's voice patched in from the Hrafnkel's bridge, which had now limped behind the protection of the orbital guns. He was no longer a fugitive. He was a king returned to his fortress. Geskust, he roared his voice, shaking with the fury of his entire defiant chapter. You want our surrender. You want our home. You want our honor. A massive shadow moved on the surface of Fenris, as the Great Annulus, the primary supercannon of the Fang itself, a weapon capable of crippling a battleship in a single shot, began to elevate its energy signature, climbing to unimaginable levels aimed directly at the Solanus. We are the sons of Russ. We are the storm. We are the Emperor's true executioners. You have no authority here. Your blockade is an insult, and your threats are the mewling of a beaten cur. Grimnar's voice was the promise of mutual annihilation. Come and take what you dare. Aboard the Sword of Titan Lord Prognosticator Kaisnar watched the confrontation unfold. The tactical display showed the terrifying reality of Geskust's folly. The orbital platforms of Fenris were not mere defenses. They were relics of the dark age of technology bristling with firepower that rivaled his own. The auger readings from the Fang's primary cannon suggested an energy output that was simply put impossible. The Red Hunters, their vessels forming an eager, blood-red attack spear, were broadcasting litanies of hatred, begging for the order to assault. On the command channel, Geskust was giving that very order. All fleets prepare for planetary assault. The Inquisitor's voice was a cold spike of venom. The victorious Tally will lead the breach. Breach the orbital net, begin planetary bombardment of the primary fortress. Kaisnar listened, and his cold, logical, and duty-bound soul finally fractured. He looked at the scene not as a warden, but as a warrior. He saw the Red Hunters not as righteous executioners, but as rabid, fanatical dogs. He saw Geskust not as a purveyor of necessary logic, but as a petulant tyrant driven by a personal, egotistical rage. This was not a cleansing. This was not about containing a psychic plague. This was a vendetta. Geskust was about to order Astartes to fire on the fortress monastery of a first founding chapter. He was about to ignite a civil war that would make Armageddon look like a border skirmish, a war that would gladden the heart of the archenemy more than any demonic incursion. He and his Grey Knights, the most sacred and secret of all the Emperor's warriors, had been used. They had been manipulated. They had been Geskust's personal butchers, their holy mission of demon-slaying perverted into a tool for a mortal man's pride. My Lord Justica Orion said, his voice quiet at Kisner's side. What are your orders? Shall we prepare to engage? Kisner did not reply for a long moment. He closed his eyes, his mind communing with the collective spirit of his ship. When he opened them, they were clear and colder than the Fenrisian void. He did not reply to Geskust. He did not engage the Space Wolves. Instead, he opened a fleet-wide channel encrypted for his own Grey Knight vessels only. All ships of the Aegis Argentum. A new empiric threat has been detected. A psychic echo harmonic with the Armageddon incursion signature, Maleficarum Prime. It was of course a lie. A necessary, profound, and damning lie. The source is classified. Beyond this system, it requires our immediate total intervention. Our sacred duty calls. We are not arbiters of mortal pride. We are demon hunters. On the Solanus Bridge, Geskust saw the Grey Knight signatures begin to disengage from the blockade line. Prognosticator Kisnar Geskust shrieked, his voice losing its cold composure for the first time. What is the meaning of this? You will hold the line, I command you. Kisner's voice calm and final cut across the Inquisitors. My Lord Inquisitor, our purpose here is concluded. A true threat, one worthy of the 666th chapter, has manifested. We cannot be delayed by this internal dispute. Our oath to Titan supersedes your authority in this. We go to war. This is war, Kisner. You will not. The Emperor protects, Kisner said, and cut the channel. In a display of perfect coordinated void mastery, the entire Grey Knight fleet turned as one. They did not limp away. They did not retreat. They departed. Their warp drives engaged, and in a series of silent silver-blue flashes, the sword of Titan and its escorts vanished, leaving a gaping, sudden hole in Gesgust's blockade. The Inquisitor stood on his bridge, shaking with a fury that was utterly silent. He had been publicly, profoundly humiliated. The core of his elite forces, his silver-armored scalpel, had just declared his war a petty squabble and left. He was now left with the Imperial Navy, who were all but broadcasting their reluctance, and the Red Hunters. The Hunters were eager, but they were a boarding and shock assault chapter. They were not designed for a protracted planetary siege against an entire first founding chapter in their home fortress. Gesgust looked at the massive, glowing orbital platforms. He looked at the energy signature of the Fang's main cannon still climbing, still aimed directly at his bridge. To attack now would be suicide. His fleet would be shattered against the ice and iron of Fenris. He could not win. He could not crack the Fang. But his pride, his all-consuming righteous pride, would not let him retreat. He could not leave. The blockade held, but the invasion was over. Gesgust, his fleet suddenly looking small and insufficient, was now trapped in a bitter, agonizing stalemate. He could not attack. He would not leave. He could only watch and hate. The stalemate held for 3 days. 3 days of agonizing cosmic silence, where two fleets hung in the void, their guns aimed, their leaders locked in a battle of pure, unadulterated will. On the 4th day, the will of the Inquisitor broke. A single encrypted signal flashed from the Solanus to the Red Hunters. Then, with a ponderous, agonizing slowness that seemed to betray its master's humiliation, the Solanus turned. Its bladed prow no longer a symbol of judgment, but one of defeat, pointed away from Fenris, away from the Fang, and moved toward the Mandeville Point. The Red Hunters fleet, their vox channels spitting static-laced curses of cowardice and unfinished, followed their movements sharp and angry. The Imperial Navy, with palpable relief, was already gone. Lord Inquisitor Gesgust stood on his bridge, his back to his crew. He watched the rebellious, ice-shrouded world of Fenris shrink in the view screen. He had not been beaten by force of arms. He had been beaten by politics, by the defection of the Grey Knights, by the suicidal, illogical honor of a savage. He had come to deliver judgment and had been judged himself and found wanting. The shame was a physical poison in his veins. He would not forget this. He would not forget the name Logan Grimnar. This was no longer about a cleansing. It was a blood feud, and he had millennia to see it paid. On the planet below, there was no celebration, no mead was drunk, no victory sagas were sung. The Hrafnkel, crippled and dying, was brought to rest in the colossal, cavern-like orbital docks of the Fang. It was a tomb, its decks silent, its corridors stained with the blood of brothers. Days later, in the vast, echoing chamber known as the Great Hall, Logan Grimnar stood before his assembled wolf lords. The survivors of Armageddon and the Home Guard stood side by side, a chapter united yet scarred. Ulrich the Slayer, his ancient voice heavy, had given the event its name. The Volund Tungle, the month of shame. Grimnar, his armor repaired, but its scars deliberately left untouched, stepped onto the dais of the king. He held his great axe Morkai in one hand. In the other he held something small, a long, yellowed wolf's tooth pulled from his own private collection. "Brothers!" His voice rumbled, echoing off the 1,000-foot stone ceilings. "We have been declared traitoris. The Imperium we have bled for 10,000 years now names us hostis humani. They have murdered the innocent we protected. They have spat on our honor." He let the words hang, the collective anger in the hall, a palpable simmering heat. "This," he roared, his voice cracking, "will not be forgotten. This will never be forgiven. They call us beasts, they call us rabid. Then we will show them the fangs of the Vilka Fenrika." He raised the tooth. "They hunt us. But a true wolf is never the prey. I, Logan Grimnar, High King of Fenris, hereby declare a storage act." A great hunt. A roar of approval went up, 1,000 gauntlets banging on breastplates. A great hunt was the most sacred of all their rituals. "But we do not hunt a Xenos beast," Grimnar continued, his voice dropping to a low, lethal growl. "We do not hunt a lost relic. We hunt a man." He drew a long, runic knife from his belt. Slowly, with deliberate, angry strokes, he began to carve a name into the hard enamel of the tooth. The scraping sound was loud in the sudden silence. He carved 8 runes, Ghesquersti. "I take this oath of vengeance," Grimnar declared, holding the inscribed tooth high for all to see. "I will not rest. I will not sheath Morkai in peace. The great hunt will not end until the Inquisitor Geskust is brought to justice. Not the Emperor's justice. Ours." He threaded a thick leather cord through a hole in the tooth's root and tied it around his neck. It rested on his chest plate, a constant physical reminder of his vow. He has declared us his enemy. Today we declare him our quarry. This hunt will last a year or 1,000 years, but it will end only when his head lies at my feet. That is my oath. He turned to his warriors, his eyes burning with a cold, righteous fire that would define him for the rest of his long life. "Who hunts with me?" The answering howl shook the foundations of the Fang itself. In the silent, sanctified halls of the fortress monastery on Titan, there was no record of the Armageddon conflict. No honors were inscribed, no sagas were sung. The month of shame was a secret buried even from the secretive, just as the names of the Grey Knights were buried from the Imperium. Aboard the Sword of Titan, drifting in the cold void, far from both Armageddon and Fenris, Lord Prognosticator Kisnar stood in the Chamber of Reflection. Before him, Justica Orion. His helmet removed his face. Grim placed a single scorched relic on the obsidian altar, the melted hilt of a Nemesis halberd, recovered from the boarding action on the Hrafnkel. It was all that remained of Justica Elam, slain by a Wolfguard's axe. "His name is entered in the Liber Defunctorum," Orion said, his voice flat. "He died in service to the Emperor." Did he? Kisnar's voice was a whisper. He did not turn. Or did he die in service to a mortal's pride? We were used, Orion. Our sacred charge, our holy purpose, perverted into a tool of personal vengeance. "We followed the logic, my lord," Orion stated, but the certainty was gone from his voice. "The logic was sound," Kisnar replied, his hand clenching. "The contamination was real. The decision was pure. But the motive was rotten." He turned, his ancient eyes filled with a cold, weary light. "Geskust, he used our oaths against us. He forced our hand to bloody us, to make us complicit in his feud. The Grey Knights had obeyed. They had done the right thing according to the ironclad calculus of their war. They had chosen the security of the Imperium over the lives of 10,000, and in doing so, they had sacrificed a piece of their honor. They had been made Geskust's butchers, and they had been forced to turn their holy weapons upon another first founding chapter. The shame was a cold, acidic knot in their collective soul. "The wolves will not forget," Orion said. "Nor will we," Kisnar said. "We will not speak of this. We will not engage with them. We will retreat deeper into the shadows. We have seen the flaw in the Imperium, the rot in its guardians. Our vigilance must be absolute. We will trust no one, Orion, no one, only Titan, only ourselves." The divide between the wolves of Fenris and the Knights of Titan became a chasm of cold, hostile silence that would last for centuries. The Grey Knights, already the most secretive of all Astartes, became even more insular, more ruthless, their logic now tinged with the bitter memory of their own manipulation, determined to never ever be used again. The war for the rest of the Imperium never happened. The loss of life on Armageddon was attributed to acceptable casualties in the war against the Beast. The battle in orbit was a classified, sealed and forgotten skirmish. 37 years later, Lord Inquisitor Gescust was finally brought to account. It was not for Armageddon. It was not for his vendetta against the Space Wolves. In his arrogance, he had attempted to purge a cardinal of the ecclesiarchy on Ophelia VII, declaring him a heretic for a minor doctrinal dispute. He had overreached. The Ordo Hereticus, protective of its own jurisdiction and wary of Gescust's growing unchecked power, launched an investigation. Tome upon tome of his actions were unsealed. They found patterns of megalomania, of using Ordo Malleus assets to settle personal scores, of sacrificing imperial assets for his own pride. In a cold, sterile chamber on Holy Terra, a tribunal of inquisitors, their faces hooded, reviewed the case. The excommunicate traitoris decree against the Space Wolves was mentioned. This one inquisitor said tapping the data slate was an overreach. The chapter master's reaction, while feral, was a response to a direct, unauthorized provocation by Lord Gescust against a loyal Astartes chapter. The excommunicatus is procedurally flawed. There was no apology, no admission of wrongdoing, no messenger was sent to Fenris. In the Fang, a single-coded data burst was received by the Iron Priests. It was an update to the Imperial Book of Judgments. The decree of excommunicate traitoris against the Vilca Fenrica was officially quietly revoked. It was filed under administrative correction. Logan Grimner, his beard now more grey than white, read the report on the bridge of his newly rebuilt flagship. He looked at the administrative pardon, the cold, bureaucratic words that washed away his chapter's treason with the stroke of a pen. He did not celebrate. He simply tapped the wolf's tooth that still hung around his neck. The name Gescust was still carved deep into it. The hunt continues. He growled. The retraction was meaningless. The blood had been spilt. The insult remained. The ships that Logan Grimner saved, the Skjold and the Freki, were never seen again. Their blind, desperate jump into the Imperium was a final act of faith, and the uncaring Imperium devoured them for it. The Skjold was lost entirely, its Gellerfield failing, its thousands of souls given over to the horrors of the warp, a fate infinitely worse than the clean death Gescust had offered. The Freki translated back into real space decades later, and light years off course, emerging from the storm into the heart of an orc war. The last garbled transmission spoke of a desperate fight for survival of ramming orc vessels as their life support failed. They were not saved. They were merely given a different death, one far from the eyes of the Imperium they had died for. Their sacrifice and Grimner's was ultimately for nothing. They were a footnote in a forgotten war, their story erased, their lineage ending in blood and fire. The Great Hunt became a legend within the Fang. It became a driving, consuming passion for Logan Grimnar. Gescust, censured by the Ordo Hereticus, but too powerful and well-connected to be executed, was reassigned to the Segmentum Pacificus. It was a political exile, but not a punishment. But Grimner did not care. For the next 300 years, the Great Wolf was rarely seen on Fenris. He led his wolf lords on a relentless, obsessive pursuit. He was an old man's rage given immortal life, his hair now white, as the Fenrisian snows his face a roadmap of cold fury. The hunt for Gescust became the defining saga of his long rule. He followed the Inquisitor's trail of cold, logical purges across 100 worlds. He was always one step behind. He arrived on the penal world of St. Cygnus, only to find Gescust had left a week prior, leaving a population of 10 million miners executed for psychic deviancy. He cornered a ship he believed to be the Solanus in the asteroid fields of Moria, only to find it a decoy, a trap that cost him another strike cruiser. The feud became his life. The memory of the 14 billion dead was no longer a drive for justice. It was the fuel for a personal, all-consuming vendetta. Gescust had not only murdered the innocent, he had corrupted the soul of the hero who tried to save them. The hunt was no longer about honor. It was about hate. The scene fades, leaving the great wolf a silhouetted figure of unending, fruitless rage, still hunting his ghost across the uncaring stars. The final image settles on Armageddon. It is 400 years after the month of shame. The planet is thriving. The sky is a brilliant clear blue, the atmospheric poison scrubbed clean by Mechanicus terraforming engines. The great hive cities Hell's Reach, Tartarus, Infernus have been rebuilt larger and more magnificent than before. Billions of new colonists, their faces bright, their loyalty absolute toil, in the manufactorums singing hymns to the Emperor as they build the weapons for his eternal wars. They know nothing of Angron. They know nothing of the First War. They know only that they live on a blessed, productive imperial world. The camera moves down past the gleaming spires, past the bustling streets, past the deepest foundations of the new hive Hell's Reach. It sinks into the ground, into the dark, cold earth. It moves through kilometers of new rockcrete and plasteel pilings down into the bedrock of the world itself. They're compressed by the unimaginable weight of the new civilization above it, is a thick, white-gray stratum of rock. It stretches from horizon to horizon, a layer of geological history. The camera pushes closer, the focus tightening until the texture of the white-gray layer becomes clear. It is not rock, it is bone. It is a solid, compressed, fossilized mass of 14 billion human skeletons, the remains of the processed generation, their bodies bulldozed into the great craters and plains, used as the literal foundation for the new, clean world built atop their memory. They are silent. They are forgotten. And the Imperium's victory is built quite literally upon the bones of its own innocent dead. The shame was not Geistgust's nor Grimnar's. The shame was the Imperium's, and it was absolute.